if Hasbro gets out of the toy business, it looks like I'm going to have to find another hobby.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other two books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. There has been speculation among many in the toy community that Hasbro is looking to get out of the toy business. Now, Hasbro has been a major manufacturer of toys for over a century, and while the business has gone on for many years, as Hasbro has acquired many other toy companies in the past, like it did with Kenner and Galoob and Milton Bradley, it has turned into a major corporation acquiring many toy companies and much of the intellectual property that are owned by those toy companies or licensed by them. And Hasbro basically at this point has expanded to a point where the new CEO is looking to get out of the toy business, possibly because the business has nowhere to go as he sees it. And as he sees it, since the toy business has no place to go, he basically wants to go in a different direction, focusing more on computer games and also focusing on licensing out many of the intellectual properties they acquire to third-party companies and having those companies manufacture them and mitigate the risks that Hasbro would take as related to manufacturing toys. Now, Hasbro in and of itself has been struggling for the last couple of years coming out of the pandemic, and even before that, as related to many of their licensed merchandise lines not really pulling in profits like they used to. Now, there are many of Hasbro's licensed brands like Star Wars are no longer seeing that they're profitable, and even lines like Marvel with the Marvel Legends line have been struggling over the last couple of years, with much of the product not being picked up by collectors and kids at the toy stores or in the toy aisles of Walmart and Target. No, what's been happening over at Hasbro is many of their toys basically they wind up at discount retailers like Ollie's, Burlington, and Ross, and sold for discount prices, and that basically has hurt Hasbro's bottom line and really prevented them from being able to actualize the profits that they speculated they would get when they would go out here and put product on the shelf. Now, this is a major about face for Hasbro, which basically saw its profits hit record numbers during the 20-teens when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was at its peak, and the peak that it had as related to other licensed lines like its Power Rangers on Lightning Collection line and many other toy lines doing very well like Star Wars. However, the fortunes of Hasbro basically took a major decline as related to things, I believe, starting with 2015, where they speculated that the sequel trilogy Star Wars toys would basically fly off the shelves. Unfortunately, that movie wound up not really performing very well, and even worse, that whole series of movies did not perform well at retailers, and as the Star Wars license went into decline, and venture capitalists basically derailed the entire platform of Toys R Us as a business, Hasbro basically started to take losses because without a major toy retailer in the United States to be able to distribute product to, they lost, again, Toys R Us, and that really hurt Hasbro's business. Moreover, Hasbro's business started to further go into a decline when its Marvel line from the as related to Marvel Cinematic Universe toys basically fell off in 2019 after Avengers Endgame, and these toy lines basically were a building block for Hasbro as related to their business and their profits. And with those lines not doing very well over the last couple of years, this is where Hasbro started to have problems, and that compounded by their old CEO having cancer and passing away, left the business in a place where it really did not have a good direction, And the new CEO, as I see it, really doesn't know where to take the business, so he's going down a road that he feels more comfortable with instead of trying to look to find a way to adapt the business and find out what customers of today want as toys. Now, with the new CEO, he's made a lot of bad decisions, as I see it, as related to Hasbro. One mistake that he made was rushing out so much product at one time, and rushing out so much product, basically, this wound up alienating a lot of the toy collectors who basically felt overwhelmed because there was just like so many lines coming out at once, and a person couldn't purchase it all at one time. Now, before, the old Hasbro CEO, what he would do is pace out these toy lines so that people could be able to have the money to buy them, and basically you would get maybe 2 Spider-Man waves over a year, a Marvel Legends wave, 2 Marvel Legends waves, and possibly a line like a Lightning Collection or a G.I. Joe Classified. And in a quarter, you could basically afford to purchase these figures and not break your bank. But the new CEO, he basically made it where you basically have so many lines coming out at once that it becomes overwhelming. And as it becomes overwhelming, many collectors basically wind up tapping out and walking away. And that's how they alienated a lot of their customer base. And that, along with them going out here and overproducing a lot of figures, this turned off a lot of people in the collectible toy market. And this is why we have this glut of figures basically winding up at discount prices and at discount retailers like Ollie's, Burlington, and Ross, because what Hasbro's new CEO basically has done is oversaturate the market with so much product that many customers just can't afford to buy it all. And sadly, that's because this new CEO really doesn't understand the business of toys. And since he doesn't understand the business of toys, what he thinks he can do is, again, rush out a lot of product and hope that people will anticipate to buy it. But that's just not how the collector market works, nor does it work well for casual customers like children. Because as someone who's been a collector of toys for over 30 years and a guy who has been out here again in the toy aisle and at places like Toys R Us, I understand that when it comes to toys, what you want to do is, again, pace these lines out, because people don't have money like that in the first place, and you don't want to have wave after wave overwhelming the customer. That's one of the mistakes the Hasbro CEO made when I saw him take over as related to the business. The other is that he basically just has saturated the market with so many characters of the same time over and over again that nobody really has an incentive to buy anything, because everything is available all the time. I mean, right now we've got over about 50 Spider-Mans, and he wants to launch a Maximum Spider-Man later on. And again, it's just people at this point just don't care at this point. I mean, every other couple of months we've got a Spider-Man, we've got a Captain America, we've got an Iron Man, and again, nothing really special about them. It's the same molds recolored and possibly pinless joints, but that's not enough to really get you excited to go out here and put in a pre-order for any action figures. And it hurt Hasbro's business, because if you keep putting the same characters out over and over again, people just don't care. And even worse, he puts out the same characters at a higher price, and this was shown with the Secret Wars Iron Man. I mean, we recently had the AI Iron Man, which was a part of the Shang-Chi line, which is still on clearance right now. You can get that figure for half price of the Secret Wars Iron Man, but the Hasbro CEO isn't really looking at the big picture as related to toys, and that's really the reason why they're struggling right now, is because he really doesn't have a vision for the business, because he comes from Microsoft, and him coming from Microsoft, he knows video games and computers more than people, and that is basically one of the reasons why Hasbro is having problems right now. Now, Hasbro overall basically, again, was looking to rely on these old intellectual properties like Marvel and Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and that's a major problem for the toy business because the toy business is supposed to be a youth business and focused on children. Unfortunately, what's happened over the last couple of years as Gen Xers like myself have gotten older is that a lot of us have gotten into collecting toys, and that's created an adult toy market. And sadly, what happens with companies like Hasbro is that they're focusing more on those adult collectors instead of having a balance of focusing on both the adult collector and children. And instead of focusing on balancing the two, they basically have just gone on a pendulum swing over to the adult toy collector, and that has left an empty market for children. Now, when it comes to children, I believe that there's still a market for toys for children, even though these days a lot of kids play with mostly apps and video games. Children still love toys, but the whole thing is you have to create toys that kids can relate to. And the problem over at Hasbro is that they haven't focused on creating anything that kids can relate to today and show them a picture of their world today. No, when it comes to Hasbro, they haven't really focused on looking to develop any sort of new concepts as related to children, and other YouTubers like Retro Blasting have talked about this, and Mr. Superboy talked about this when he talked about how we need programming and content for children. No, when it comes to companies like Hasbro, they basically haven't focused on kids, and as they haven't focused on kids, they've basically missed out on a major market as related to things because they had a major market early on in the 20-teens when the MCU was going on, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They had a market, but they didn't look to continue building on that market and didn't look to, again, not just give them MCU toys, but give them new characters, because what kids want today really are new characters that relate to, that they can relate to and see their world and their life experiences. They want to see toys that basically reflect their lives, but sadly, companies like Hasbro basically have had a bad case of tunnel vision because they want to go for the easy money from collectors, but don't want to go out here and take the risk on the kids. And since they don't want to take the risk on the kids, they basically want to, instead of look to, again, put in the work, what they want to do is now want to focusing on the two directions of being an IP farm and going out here and looking to license and outsource their toy manufacturing. They want to outsource and license their toy manufacturing because in their eyes, manufacturing toys has gotten too costly because they just basically just want to do things on the cheap. And that's a classic nerd thing, that nerds love to do stuff on the cheap. And that shows because they've gone from making plastic in China to plastic in India, and that's led to a really decline in quality of Hasbro toys, as some collectors have speculated. I mean, the quality of a Hasbro toy these days, basically, a lot of people are saying that their Transformers break, and many of their figures, again, have just poor quality because they switched plastic manufacturing from China to India, and that's all due to the CEO really not having a good vision for the business of Hasbro. A vision to basically say, hey, we got to start focusing on toys, got to start focusing on children. And that's the real issue with Hasbro at this point, as I see it. The real issue is that they don't have a visionary to set a direction for the brand of this storied corporation. No, they have a CEO from Microsoft, but again, a Microsoft CEO. Yeah, he knows computers, and he wants to go to what he's comfortable with by focusing on computer games, and wants to license out the other toys like Power Rangers to other competitors like Playmates. He wants to license it out so that they can go out here and take the loss as related to those toys, when in actuality there is a chance to, again, compete in the American toy market and compete in the American toy market effectively. Because if you have companies like SH Figuarts, Figma, and other Japanese brands doing very well here in America, then it proves that there is a toy market here in America. But the problem is, American toy companies are run by incompetent people who really don't know the business of toys, and really, as I see it, don't know the concept of balance, because understanding balance means that, yes, we have our collectibles market for the older Gen Xers and the millennials who basically go out here and collect toys, but we also have a market for young children. We have a market for young children where we focus on creating toys that appeal to today's children, because children do still love toys. Children still love to play, but the whole thing is you have to go out here and cultivate that market, and adapt to things, because you have people sitting there saying, oh, there's no toy market, but the whole thing there is, and there is a way to, again, appeal to them with licensed properties. I mean, kids don't watch TV, they watch streaming, and when it comes to kids, again, kids are not interested in concepts that were from 40 years ago, which is one of the problems Hasbro is having. Hasbro has a problem in that most of their IPs are just too old. I mean, you have G.I. Joe and Transformers, which are about 40 to 42 years old. You have Indiana Jones, that's about 45 years old. You have Star Wars, that's 50 years old. You have Marvel, that's 85 years old as related to its comic lines. And again, you're talking to this new generation Beta, about old concepts that basically are from Grandpa. And that's not going to appeal to those kids, because that's not their story, that's not their world, that's not their life experience. I mean, if I, again, at 51, know about G.I. Joe Classified, again, that's something to me because I grew up with that in the 80s. But what are kids growing up with right now? I mean, what are they growing up with right now as their escape? That's the critical question Hasbro CEO has not asked himself. I mean, what are the kids today growing up that they can say is theirs as related to pop culture? Because people are always talking about pop culture and culture war. But what concepts are kids growing up with? I mean, most kids these days, they're basically growing up with Dragon Ball Z. And again, that's a 35 or 40-year-old show. And we're not making anything new for kids, because many of these companies are filled with cowardly executives who don't have the backbone or the stones to go out here and take a risk on a concept from a creator like myself. They don't have the backbone or the stones to take a risk on something new, because they are so obsessed with profits that they don't even care about the people or the customers. No, it's all about getting people to go out here and hoard stuff as related to collecting, and get them to go from buying one line to the next, and get them to buy one product to the next, go from buying pinned figures to pinless figures. And again, that's not really going to incentivize a new customer. Again, you want to get that kid the way Mattel did with Monster High in about 2010 or so. I mean, Monster High basically was an evergreen property for Mattel, but they fumbled that football around the time of Freaky Fusion. I mean, you had 4 dolls like in Draculaura, Claudine Wolf, Cleo Denial, and Laguna Blue that basically were evergreen dolls that you could have sold for about 10 years straight. But Mattel basically fumbled the football, and as they fumbled the football, they basically lost, again, a lot of money trying to focus on diversity and inclusion Barbies that did not sell very well. And the same thing is happening here at Hasbro, where they basically, again, have a CEO who's been fumbling the football because, again, he doesn't understand that the money you're supposed to take from the licensed properties, you're supposed to invest in creating new concepts and going out here and reaching out to new customers. And again, reaching out to new customers in ways that are effective, because Hasbro, what it wanted to do when it was trying to make entertainment, they wanted to do things with like Transformers 1, where they fumbled the football once more, because Transformers 1, again, that movie would have made money had they put it out at the right time, but their executives didn't understand the business of entertainment, and that's the big problem over at Hasbro. Nobody understands the business of entertainment. Nobody understands the business of toys, and what they want to do now is, again, find a way out of the business, because the problem for them, as related to toys overall is that you have somebody who doesn't have experience as related to the business, and since they don't have experience as related to the business, they basically are driving Hasbro to get out of the toy business, as some are speculating. As some are speculating, they're looking to try to get Hasbro out of the business because they want to do what they're comfortable at. And again, when it comes to customers, again, you have to give the customer what they want. But the problem is that Hasbro basically has tunnel vision, so they'd rather just keep giving you Spider-Man's, Captain America's, Luke Skywalker action figures, again, over and over again, instead of finding out what kids today want in an action figure, what kids want as related to characters, what type of stories do they relate to, what kind of experiences they're having. And this is, again, detrimental to children, because what I'm seeing with children is that they're going on the internet, since they don't have their own pop culture. Since they don't have their own pop culture, they're basically going out here and reading more about mass shooters and other types of antisocial behaviors. And that's because we don't have a pop culture for them to be a part of. We don't have a pop culture that's theirs. And again, the toy business is part of that pop culture. And without them creating a pop culture for kids, kids basically, again, are going to YouTube. They're watching guys like me. They're watching people on TikTok. Again, they're going these places because we haven't created a pop culture. And again, pop culture is part of America, but the whole thing is we have people who don't want to let go of pop culture. Again, what I see with a lot of boomers and Gen Xers and some millennials is that they don't want to let go of these characters and pass them on to the next generation, or let them discover their own characters. That was one of the things I was blessed to be as part of Gen X, is that my brother had his own pop culture in characters like the Green Hornet and Adam West Batman, but I had my own pop culture in characters like Transformers and G.I. Joe and Voltron and Silverhawks and Real Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice and Super Friends. And I mean, we had our own pop culture, and my cousin had his own pop culture. He was a millennial. He had his own pop culture in Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles and many other shows like Eek the Cat and Big Guy and Rusty and all those shows. And the kids who came after that, they had the Batman, and they had other shows like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. I mean, kids had their own pop culture up to a point where these companies, again, stopped making stuff for kids. I mean, even stuff like the Winx Club. I see a lot of girls cosplaying as Winx Club. Again, people had pop culture, but around the late 2000s, people stopped having pop culture because corporations got greedy. But as they got greedy, they looked to keep mining the same properties instead of creating new ones. And right now, if Hasbro could turn its whole business around, it could turn its whole business around if it started creating new characters and new stories. Again, going to creators like myself and license some new characters and some new stories. They could possibly, again, take their business to the next level. But the sad part is that we've got a problem with old executives stuck in the past and not executives focused on the future. That's the big problem that's happening at Hasbro, where it has them looking to exit the toy business instead of buckling down and looking to focus on the next generation and find out what the next generation wants as related to its pop culture and its pop culture toys. Now, if you want to check out some of my intellectual properties on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find my books featuring my characters like Isis, Esteem, and John Haynes, and many of my other characters that I usually try to create PG-13 content in those 3 series. And you can find all of those books in the Isis series, the Esteem series, and the John Haynes series on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos talking about different topics, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers. E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.